1-point swing, a fifth seat that New Hampshire Democrats have flipped from red to blue since the presidential election in 2016. There was also another flip tonight in Connecticut. Democrats clawed back a seat held by Republicans in a district that Hillary Clinton had actually won in 2016. Phil Young won tonight in the House District 120 in Connecticut. He'll be the first Democrat to represent that district in Connecticut in 44 years. So there were three special elections tonight. Democratic pickup in New Hampshire, Democratic pickup in Connecticut. That, I think, makes 39 total Democratic flips from red seats to blue seats since December 2016. But check out the result tonight in the third special election tonight that happened in Kentucky. Now, in this one, as you can see, the Democrat lost. This is a Kentucky special election for a House seat. But frankly, it's news here that the Democrats even tried to contest this seat. This seat, House District 89 in Kentucky, is a district that Donald Trump won by a margin of 62 points. The Democrat lost there tonight, but she still swung the district almost 30 points in the Democrats' favor compared to 2016. So again, tonight there were three special elections. Democrats flipped two seats tonight in those two seats out of three, from Republican to Democrat in New Hampshire and Connecticut. And in the third one in Kentucky, they pulled off a 28-point swing. This has basically been the story of special elections that we've seen across the country in red states and blue states since the November 2016 presidential election. Democrats look at those special election results across the country and they see stars in their eyes in terms of what's going to happen in November 2018. Every election is its own local story. You can't predict what's going to happen 8 months out from an election that's going to happen at the end of this year. But you look at these special election results night after night after night, Tuesday after Tuesday after Tuesday, throughout these off-year special elections, and you can see why Democrats feel like they've got the momentum. That does it for us tonight. We will see you again tomorrow. Now it's time for the last word. Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel. And I have some breaking news for you from the New York.
Not say. I mean, she went before House Intelligence. She refused to talk about any of her time in the White House. And for a while, she was refusing to answer questions about the period during the presidential transition after Donald Trump won the election before he was president. And then the committee basically came back to her and said, wait, you've already answered some of these questions for the Senate Intelligence Committee. Why aren't you answering them for us? And then she was a little bit more forthcoming about her time during the transition. But you can tell members were coming out of that and were again a little bit dissatisfied. And there is a new report that just came out in the New York Times that said that one of the things that Hope Hicks apparently did admit when she was talking to the committee was that in representing Donald Trump over the course of the campaign, she occasionally had to tell white lies. Apparently, that's according to the New York Times. And I can tell you, Anderson, that certainly is not a surprise to anyone who covered the campaign like I did.
Hope Hicks is obviously very close to the president, been with the president for a long time as a citizen, was part of some of the more high-profile things the investigators are looking into. I mean, she's a key witness in all of this. You know, the meeting on the plane where they're crafting a statement about
2 days of interviews, and it's partly for reasons like you said. Not only was she one of the earliest hires for President Trump during the campaign, she was there with him every single day on the plane. She was with him during the transition, and then, of course, went on and followed him to the White House. But that is one of the things that she refused to talk to the House Intelligence Committee about, is how they crafted this statement that they put together on Air Force One. It was ultimately a misleading statement about a meeting that took place in June of 2016 in Trump Tower between a Russian lawyer and Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner. She did tell investigators, though, that she did not learn about that meeting until June of 2017, so about a year later, that even though she was in the building when this was happening, when this was playing out at Trump Tower, she said she was unaware of it at the time.
Interesting. Sarah Murray, thanks very much. I just want to read you the lead from the Times story that Sarah just mentioned. Quote, Hope Hicks, the White House communications director, told House investigators on Tuesday that her work for President Trump, who has a reputation for exaggerations and outright falsehoods, had occasionally required her to tell white lies. The piece offers this caveat, quote, but after extended consultation with her lawyer, she insisted that she not lied about matters material to the investigations into Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election and possible links to Trump associates, according to three people familiar with her testimony. I mean, should Paul the White House, actually, let me ask you, just from a legal standpoint, James, it does seem like there's an awful lot of people who are sort of invoking executive privilege, even though the White House hasn't really invoked executive privilege, or they're just invoking a new kind of I don't want to talk about it because I just don't think I should have to talk about it. I mean, am I wrong on that? Or?
No, I think you are wrong, and here's why. Especially it relates to everything post January 20, when the administration began. That's not her information to give, and the Senate knows it, and the House knows it, and there's a process for obtaining that information. That letter went to Hope Hicks. It did not go to the White House. If a letter went to the White House requesting privileged information relative to information that Hope Hicks gave advice to the president on, that would have been a letter that would have gone to Don McGahn, and that would have been something that would have been public, and that would have been something that would have become part of a dialogue between the White House and the committee.
So are you saying the committee dropped the ball on that?
No, I don't think they dropped the ball on it. They just know that it's executive privilege, and they're not entitled to that information.
So you're saying
I mean, this is no different than what we saw Eric Holder do in the Fast and Furious.
But doesn't the White House, and correct me, doesn't the White House have to claim executive privilege on these things?
No, these are privileged. They have to request there has to be a request made to the White House that this person testifies to matters that are relative to her job as a White House employee. That request was never made, and quite frankly, it was never within the scope of this hearing. The Democrats know it, and that's not what it was.
That's by custom, not law.
Yeah.
Okay. The privilege exists, and it has since George Washington, and it should. On this, I'm very sympathetic to the Trump White House, having been a White House official. Presidents have got to have a right to communicate and to deliberate in private, but it's a qualified privilege. It's only the president's to assert. It does not belong to Corey Lewandowski, who's never worked a day in the White House, the former campaign manager for President Trump. It doesn't belong to Ms. Hicks or to Mr. Bannon, who have apparently tried to get out, have successfully gotten out of testifying. The problem is the Republican Congress is unlikely to pursue this against a Republican president. They have subpoenaed Mr. Bannon. They can't subpoena Ms. Hicks. They can then, if they don't testify, find them in contempt.
Right. The Democrats asked them to subpoena Hope Hicks.
Right.
The Republicans.
The real problem is Mueller. That's the real problem. They can't get around this with Mueller, with this sweeping claim of privilege, because particularly in the Nixon case, but also in the Clinton case, they said executive privilege does not apply when we're getting
But does it
into
make
a
then a
criminal
mockery of these House committees?
Yes.
I mean, it's just like...
The Republicans are in charge of Congress, and
Right.
they're giving up this authority. They're giving up a congressional prerogative. They're weakening that branch of government by not fighting the executive branch on this.
The Holder case showed that. The Holder case showed that. I mean, that was
I
straight
think
out of the Obama administration. This
They
is
actually
a privilege.
invoked executive privilege on that, though.
I think we expected she was going to not answer many questions. I think we all knew that was going to happen. The only reason she was forthcoming on much of it today is because she had testified to the Senate on this. Here's where I have a problem with this. And A, the little white lie is going to come back and be an issue because a white lie is a lie. Here's my concern.
At least she was truthful on that.
Exactly. Here's the thing. If this administration says, as they do repeatedly, they're fully cooperating with any investigation, any inquiry, we're providing any information we have, it doesn't sit well when you're not answering questions before members of these intel committees. I think if you're going to fully cooperate with the intel committee, cooperate with Mueller, put all the information out there, because the reality is this isn't about protecting this administration as much as finding the truth about Russian interference in the election and how that affects our government.
Coming back to that, that's Mueller's job.
But there
right?
are
That's
two.
Mueller's job.
Well, I mean, so this is an interesting question. I, as a criminal prosecutor, see all these committees doing these investigations, and if I were Mueller, I would not want them to be happening. So because you end up with witnesses having multiple statements, and it just gets complicated, and you basically want those people to give you information and confidence that you may use to take other investigative steps.
So if you're Mueller, you're fine with them not saying anything.
If you're Mueller, you want I don't want to speak for Robert Mueller. He may say, let every process go along. We're separate branches of government. But me, as a former state, local, and federal prosecutor, would not like.
And it certainly did seem like with Steve Bannon, he
hearings.
clearly chose, okay, I'm speaking to Mueller. They had apparently marathon sessions with Mueller, but did not say much in front of these committees.
Right, well, you say not say much as it relates to his time in the White House, which is the White House's information, not Steve Bannon's to get.
But he was also talking about during the transition from the reporting, which is you can't have executive privilege because he's not the executive.
There's no executive privilege during the transition. The other piece
these guys know that they can do this before the committee because they've seen others go in and do it, and there were no consequences.
Right.
So I think your point is right. The Mueller investigation is the investigation that's actually going to get to the truth.
Just the one quick thing that we saw Hope Hicks do today when they basically said, look, you've already said this to the Senate. You waive privilege once you say something. So she has waived privilege on anything she's already said. There's no ability of her to invoke privilege. So if there are any other statements out there, all of those have to, you can't then invoke executive privilege once it's out there.
There's another really important point here to make, though, and that's the political one. To your point, Alice, this doesn't just not sit well with in the legal frame. This doesn't sit well in the political frame. When you have the CNN poll that just came out that said 60% of people think that the Russia investigation is very critical. You had a poll back in December that said the majority of the American people believe that Trump either did something unethical or at the very least inappropriate and perhaps illegal. You have the congressional generic ballot at like 13, 14, 15 points in favor of the Democrats. Today, Democrats flipped their 39th district from red to blue. And I think that the trend here is going in that this is a president and an administration that does not care about national security when it comes to a Russian entity, a foreign adversary messing with our elections, and it was an act of war. The more that you have people from this administration not being forthcoming, not telling the truth, and a president who can't even admit that the Russians meddled, that is going to be a bad thing for the Republicans. So I'm happy about it. They should keep doing it.
If the Democrats actually do take back the House and gain control of this investigative machinery, all of these White House officials, it's going to be a very, very different experience for them.
We got to take a break. I want to thank everybody. Up next, we're going to step back away from politics, thankfully, and bring you a story that you can only see on CNN. Last year, we shed light on the criminals buying and selling African migrants like cattle, buying and selling human beings. But what about those who send them to their fate? CNN's Nemel Bagher goes back undercover, posing as a would-be migrant to reveal the world of smuggler gangs. What she uncovered is frankly stunning when we continue. Substantial movement in the Mueller investigation. At the same time, after a brief lull in which he went completely silent, President Trump came roaring back on Twitter today. Witch hunt, he tweeted this morning, all caps, a sort of digital primal scream, and a familiar refrain. Former Clinton independent counsel Kenneth Starr appeared Sunday on Fox News, and the president also tweeted out a passage from the interview. Quoting Judge Starr, the president tweeted, "We've seen no evidence of collusion. I have seen nothing. The firing of James Comey and all of the aftermath that suggests the president has obstructed justice because he's exercising his powers, the president of the U.S. I just don't see it." Judge Starr joins us momentarily, along with Jeff Toobin. Just briefly, though, keep him honest, it is worth pointing out we have not yet seen evidence of collusion or obstruction from Special Counsel Mueller for a very simple reason. A, there may not be any, but he's also not released anything on that, and he is not talking. He speaks through indictments and guilty pleas, and there have been plenty, some for allegedly or admittedly lying to investigators about contacts with Russians, 13 alleging tampering by Russians in the campaign to help candidate Trump and or just cause chaos. The Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein went out of his way after that one to strongly suggest that these would not be the last indictments, and some of the language does as well. So to pick up on the president's notion, there have been a lot of real witches, or allegedly real ones already, and perhaps more to come, but we're pleased that Judge Starr is with us, as well as Jeffrey Toobin. Can you definitively say, what you said is, I've seen no collusion, no evidence of collusion. Right. Because the investigation is ongoing, even if there is, you would not have seen any evidence.
We don't know. We do not know what Bob Mueller knows. What we have seen thus far suggests to me an absence. And in fact, I think that the indictment that you mentioned, Anderson, of the 13 Russians and the 3 Russian companies is actually, at this stage, a contraindication.
How so?
Because this was a huge operation, lavishly financed, organized out of St. Petersburg, Russia, very close to Vladimir Putin. It was organized by one of the oligarchs. And I think this was essentially a shadow indictment of Vladimir Putin, who had a huge operation with, there's no evidence of any collusion with any American campaign. There was some unwitting participation. I think that's an important word, the unwitting participation, which again suggests to me it's a contraindication that this was some kind of conspiracy with Trump Tower. But we'll see.
But if, in terms of building an investigation, there's no reason why Robert Mueller would show all his evidence, and again, we don't know if there is or not, but would show everything at once. I mean, he seems to be methodically building a case.
Bob Mueller is a total professional, and one of the key things, I think, is for us to allow Bob Mueller to do his job, to get it done as promptly as he can, and he's moving with great efficiency, and I think he's moving with integrity.
Do you believe that the president, because of his role, cannot be accused of cannot obstruct justice? That anything the president does is not obstruction of justice?
No, he can exercise his power such as in firing James Comey and so forth. And here, I just have a different perspective than some of the people who say, oh, this is evidence of obstruction. I just disagree with it. And I disagree with it based upon Supreme Court precedent. The Supreme Court has warned, don't think everything is obstruction of justice. You can impede an investigation. You can say, I think I'm going to impede this investigation. I'm going to tell someone not to testify. And the Supreme Court has been absolutely clear with federal prosecutors, you're going too far. And one of the prosecutors who was told he was going too far is Anthony Weissman on Bob Mueller's staff. Now, that was yesteryear, but that is still the law of the land. And by the way, that was a unanimous Supreme Court saying prosecutors, not everything is an obstruction of justice.
Jeff Toobin, I want you to weigh in on what the judge is saying.
Well, I certainly agree that not everything is an obstruction of justice, but the idea that the president has the absolute power to fire the director of the FBI for any reason, for no reason, for a corrupt reason, if, for example, someone deposited a suitcase full of cash on the on the Oval Office desk and said, please fire the FBI director because I don't want to be prosecuted, and then he fired the FBI director, would that be permissible too, Judge?
Absolutely not. Now, that is corruption, and that's the key. That is the key word that everyone is banting around. It is corrupt. It is a corrupt effort to interfere with the obstruction of justice. And so, exactly, I've been saying that all along. If there's any evidence of a payment or some sort of conspiracy with, let's say, Russians, we don't like this investigation, and we're going to enter into this business deal. I'm speaking hypothetically. We're going to enter into this business deal, but you've got to get rid of Bob Mueller. Then, obviously, that is a corrupt motive to interfere. But the president has been so amazingly transparent. I don't like the investigation. I think it's hurting the country. It's deflecting attention and so forth. That doesn't sound to me like corruption.
Go ahead, Jeff.
But I mean, you testified famously and brilliantly, although I disagreed with it, that President Clinton could be impeached for obstruction of justice. But if the president of this president of the United States fires the FBI director because the FBI director is investigating him, that's not corruption, like Bill Clinton engaged in corruption for lying in the grand jury or for telling Betty Curry to lie. Why aren't they both corrupt?
No, you're talking now about a very different venue. You're talking about impeachment. I'm talking about the crime of obstruction of justice, which is thus far being bantied about. It's not Bob Mueller's prerogative to determine what an impeachable offense is. I did have that responsibility as the independent counsel. And so what we did was to bring the information to Congress's attention, and we didn't say it's a crime. We said there's substantial and credible information. So the quarrel I have is this a courthouse activity? And I don't think it is. That is, I don't think there are crimes have been committed. Or is it something that for Congress to consider? And obviously Congress has broad
Judge, let me ask you, because you praised Robert Mueller and you said you think the investigation should run its course.
Right.
If, the reporting we have tonight is that he's looking at financial dealings of then candidate Trump and even citizen Trump when he was thinking about running for president, do you believe that's fair in his purview? Because the president seems to think that's a red line.
Well, I don't know whether it's fair or not, but I do know this. Under the special counsel regulations under which Bob Mueller was reported, there is a check and a balance. That was one of the criticisms of the independent counsel law. The view was there are not enough checks and balances. There's no accountability on the part of the independent counsel. Here there's lots of accountability, and that's the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, can in fact step in under the regulations and say, you're not going to go there. I'm the one who, as the Deputy Attorney General, says this is a red line. So the very fact, by the way, that the indictment against the Russians was announced by Rod Rosenstein, I think is very powerful symbolically. It is reminding the country that he, as the head of the Justice Department for purposes of this investigation, is in charge.
Do you agree that this is a witch hunt? Do you believe that, as the president does, that this is a witch hunt?
No.
No. You think it's a legitimate investigation?
Bob Mueller is a professional, and I have great confidence in his integrity.
Judge Kinstar, appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
You're
Jeff
welcome.
Toobin as well. A great deal ahead. The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will not receive a top security clearance, which may imperil his work at the White House. That and a lot more when we come back.
Sup world, it's The Box with 30% savings for safe drivers. Coming at you with my brand new vlog. Just make
people in Mueller's investigation that Jared Kushner has many, many strikes lining up against him in the Mueller investigation. And the subtext here is that part of the things that have led to the rejection of his being eligible for a security clearance are also part of Mueller's investigation, particular aspects particularly aspects that have to do with perhaps monetizing his position in the White House during the transition, trying to shore up his failing business enterprises while at the same time doing business on behalf of the Trump administration.
Back now with their panel. And I mean, this is, I guess, more of a hypothetical, but if something is discovered in a background check process, say on Jared Kushner, is that something that would be referred to the Mueller team?
Well,
Probably
the background
not.
check is being done by the FBI,
Right.
as is, the team on the Mueller investigation is also part of the FBI. So it is possible that information could be shared, but as a rule, the background checks are usually sort of walled off. That being said, if there was evidence of criminal conduct, that's fair game. It's the Federal Bureau of Investigation that you're providing that information to. And I should say, you're told you have to tell the truth. Every piece of paper you submit has that saying on it saying you have to tell the truth. You're providing information to the U.S. government. And so, if there are lies or criminal conduct, there could be potential.
I mean, one of the interesting things, there was reporting recently in the New Yorker about Jared Kushner meeting privately with the Chinese ambassador, for instance, and that there was some concern, according to this reporting, about his capabilities to meet privately without even, somebody in the room taking notes, so that if later on the Chinese ambassador reported back to his, overlords in Beijing, though, well, Jared Kushner said this, and he was lying, there would be no way to actually verify what was said in that meeting.
It's so reckless, and I don't understand, again, the innocent explanation. I'm waiting to hear one. But it's akin to, in the transition, when Mr. Kushner met with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. Okay, I get that. Also reported in the U.S. press to be a Russian spy master, so you got to be on your guard. And reportedly asked Kislyak if they could meet in a secure facility, secure from the U.S., that is to say, to go into a Russian secure facility. That's crazy. Then he met with a guy named Sergei Gorkov, who is a graduate of the Kremlin spy school and runs a bank called VEB, which is reported to be very closely connected to Putin's security apparatus. Why do you meet with him? The bank says, we were talking about business. Well, you can't do that. This is a transition, but even a transition, you can't do that. Mr. Kushner says, well, no, it was governmental business. It was not my private business. But why would anybody meet with a guy who's straight out of the FSB, their security services, and running a bank that we're sanctioning because they're part of the bad guys?
Just to play devil's advocate, I get the innocent explanation would be naivete, stupidity, rather than something more.
Or also, you could say that the belief that the bureaucratic structure that exists, from the Obama administration is not necessarily trustworthy. They're trying to forge a new path. Yeah. They want to maybe bring business acumen in a way to government, and maybe felt.
I think that's a legitimate excuse. They were really paranoid about the deep state, as it's now come to be called, that all these Obama holdovers were leaking on them and were looking to do them harm. That would be the defense of why he was going into meetings without people from the State Department or the
But it's all right because Paul Manafort was there.
I'm just saying that would be the argument.
To your point about hiring the best people, right? But I think that's the point. He did campaign on having the ability to hire the best people to make America great again, and yet they couldn't find one person with the appropriate national security expertise to be with Kushner in these meetings, to be able to take the notes. And that's frankly for Kushner's protection that this happens, right? To make sure, to Anderson's point, that the Chinese ambassador or whoever else can't put one over on Kushner. My point is that that's exactly what they were trying to do. They looked at his naivete and be like, he doesn't have any kind of experience. Let's try to manipulate him. And that, I think, is also one of the things that Mueller's looking into.
I mean, I agree. I mean, to be in a meeting like that at that level by yourself, I don't know if reckless or naive, I don't know what the right word is, but it's really not a good idea for Kushner or for the United States to have somebody in there, because someone else could walk out from the other side and spin the meeting in a completely different way. You're unprotected. And so, you never would go in without a witness.
And following some of that, I think there were some checks and balances put in place with H.R. McMaster that came out where he was checking in with H.R. McMaster before he was going into those meetings.
Right, because I think, according to the reporting, McMaster was concerned about these meetings, as I think was Kelly, understandably, and they started now working much closer together, and I think put a kibosh on that.
And I think he will try to get away with a lot of those types of meetings that he had by himself by saying, I didn't know any better. Ignorance is a bliss in the situation. That being said, moving forward, everything he did and every meeting he had, he needs to be forthcoming about it. He needs to make sure that he's honest and truthful, because that's what's going to get them clearly the cover-up will be worse than the crime of these meetings that he has, and that's why it's important for him to be truthful. I think, with all due respect to Carl Bernstein, I think it was a little premature for him to say Jared's in the crosshair. I think everyone's pretty much in the same boat.
Right, Mueller's kept a pretty tight lid on things, so a hard thing to know. We got to take a brief time out. When we return, one of the president's closest aides spent hours today testifying before the House Intelligence Committee. What Hope Hicks said and didn't say. Next.
Tens of millions of people have switched to unlimited on America's most awarded network.
Verizon?
Whoa, Vince, not yet. It's the network rated #1 in the nation by Root Metrics 9.
Experience to take advantage. Back now with the panel. I mean, Paul, you worked as obviously in a White House. How serious, I mean, when you have 4 countries focusing on one of the top advisors to the president, believing that his financial entanglements make him vulnerable.
Every country, not even just our adversaries, our allies too, look for ways to influence the government. I'm not shocked by that, and I'm sure if you were to pick up the intercepts, everybody is saying, how do we get
But isn't that why you get a security clearance and you've confessed to everything that's potentially vulnerable?
Yes, and this is why, going back to the founding of the Republic, Thomas Jefferson said when a person, he said a man, but he was sexist, when a person assumes a public office, he becomes a public trust. And his point was you have to give everything over, and it's more true today than in Jefferson's time. And this is where Mr. Kushner's made a terrible mistake. He is a security risk. Not because he doesn't love his country or love his father or his job, but because he has these conflicts that he cannot reconcile, which is why I suspect they can't give him a security clearance.
And this is why, again, why we have nepotism rules, why you don't put someone, a family member, in a position like this that, A, they don't have the experience for, and B, they have business ties like they have in a struggling business that's in debt right now. That being said, the way I view this and talking with folks there at the White House, this is more of a blow to Jared politically than operationally. He will still be able to go about fulfilling the duties of his portfolio, while albeit limited. He will still have access to the information he will need to get his job done. And who's to say there's not going to be conversations between he and his father-in-law that will be helpful, information he may not have ordinarily been able to see.
Also, and I mean, if the president wants to show him every day the president's daily brief, even though he doesn't have a top secret security clearance, the president can do that.
You know, the president shouldn't do it if he doesn't have a top secret security brief, and that's because he hasn't been cleared at the level that information is at, and he could compromise sources and confidential information. Yes, the president could do it, but it is one of those things where this is an incredible level of security that goes into having the people surrounding the president have this information, and the president should honor what General Kelly has done. And, you know, I think a couple points are worth making. One is that it could be more that we actually haven't heard yet as well. This is a very long time that the security clearance was not closed. There have also been reports of failure to disclose some information. In many administrations, that alone would be grounds for not getting a top secret clearance. It is a very, very high hurdle. And so, the public reporting that we've just seen on CNN may be a piece of it, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Failure to disclose dozens of contacts with foreign governments, and then even after that it was amended, forgot to mention the Trump Tower meeting that we only learned about later on with, Donald Trump Jr.
But this is the crucial point that you ask, is the president can do whatever he wants in his White House. He is the president. And look, the president shared top secret information with the Russian ambassador and foreign minister in the Oval Office. I don't think he's going to pause
when Jared, say it like that,
when Jared and says, Pop, can I look at the PDB today?
Right.
But the problem is that he is his son-in-law, and you shouldn't bring your son-in-law into the executive office of the president, because it's very hard to get rid of your son-in-law.
And let's not forget, he did it in a very public way. The president left it up to his chief of staff, General Kelly, to make that determination. That was a responsible decision. It was the right decision to make. And I think General Kelly made the right decision in across the board. It wasn't just Jared Kushner. It was across the board, looking at these temporary clearances and downgrading the ones that needed to be downgraded.
But didn't this only become in the public eye because of what happened with Rob Porter? I mean, had that situation not imploded, would General Kelly have been given this purview to relook at everybody's security clearances? Because, to me, what's interesting is, Donald Trump made a very persuasive point during the campaign of, A, I only hire the best people, I surround myself with the best people, and B, attacking Hillary Clinton for, misusing a server, violating potentially classified information, not taking classified information seriously enough. And here he is with a White House chock full of people who don't really have much of a track record, who turns out can't get a security clearance.
The hypocrisy is astounding
I don't think it's chock full with folks who can't get a security clearance. You have a process that's taken much too long a time, and a chief of staff who's now recognized through the problem that came to light through Rob Porter.
Right, but it's not taken that much time because the FBI just doesn't have enough folks doing it, because every administration has the same number of people essentially getting security clearances. In fact, this White House maybe even has fewer because they don't have as many people in jobs. But the security clearances do not take this long unless there's some major problem.
And there are very few White Houses who have had as many people as this White House had for so long having an interim security clearance, and at the same time sharing top secret information that is of the utmost importance on the most critical of issues, which is what the portfolio that Jared Kushner has been handed.
Well, but hang
on a second. To your point, Anderson, the hypocrisy here is just astounding, because he not only campaigned on this, but every single Republican who was so against Hillary Clinton also echoed that she would be a security risk. Look at how she handled her emails. And now, where's the outcry from Republicans? Had this been a President Hillary Clinton that would have given that kind of portfolio to her son-in-law, and then we find that her son-in-law has had all of this stuff?
Mark Msnbc, is that his name?
Yes.
With all his financial dealings and like some not great successes was running around without a security clearance and representing the U.S., there would be a freak out.
There would be hellfire coming from congressional Republicans.
For a second here, though. The same people making the people with security clearance, top secret and secure compartment security clearance, are the folks still making the national security decisions in the White House, the same folks making the intelligence decisions in the White House, the NSC, those folks have the correct clearances. Let's not blow this out of proportion.
Right, but let me point out, a top secret security clearance is not that big a security clearance. I mean, there's code word security clearances, which are much higher than that. You know, just about everybody gets a top secret security clearance.
You can't have it both ways, Anderson.
One thing, though,
my point is, you should be able to pass,
and then turn around and say, well, it's not that big of a deal.
No, it's not a big deal for the actual clearances. Right. You should be able to get it. A college student in college who applies to the CIA gets a top secret security clearance when you're working a summer job there. I can guarantee you that, and that takes a couple of months. You just have to confess everything you've ever done, and that's, seems to be the problem.
The point is that if Jared can't get a top secret security clearance, there is something in his background that is of huge interest to those who are not giving it to him, and it's for a reason.
One thing, though, I think
whether he can or he can't.
It's easy to get caught up in the palace intrigue. If we take a step back, I think this is a victory for General Kelly and for his commitment to making sure we have a White House staff that meets the highest standards we can and should do better, and hats off to him.
We've got to take a quick break. We're going to have more on this when we continue. More on the breaking news, also about the president's son-in-law and the decision to downgrade his interim security clearance.
This is Lobster Fest at Red Lobster, with exciting new dishes like dueling lobster tails and lobster truffle mac and cheese.